everybody, and welcome to Economics Monday with the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States of America. And today we're going to do a special broadcast on financial education in the United States. And with that, of course, we're going to bring in our panel and, of course, our special guest who's going to talk about financial education in the United States. First of all, one of the co-founders of the network, we have Kim Calhoun, who's busily working in the background and making sure everything's taken care of for us. We have from the Los Angeles area, we have Rick Rosner, who is one of the high IQ people from the Mega Society. We need smart people on our network. We have Sasha Starr, speaking about a smart person, a chess expert, and also a musician, and runs 3 of our shows on the network. For those who haven't seen him before, we have Mark Lee, who is with Lee Productions, who runs a lot of our shows across the network. And of course, the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States, who's going to be addressing this very important issue of financial education. And with that, the person that we're going to bring in as our special guest today is an author of 2 books. One book that I read years ago. It's called The Millionaire Next Door. If you haven't read it, it is available on the Pod TV bookstore. All you do is podtv.tv and you can go buy the book, thanks to our partnership with Amazon. Okay, then his new book, Richer Than a Millionaire, that just came out, is also available on the Pod TV bookstore, which you can get later on. He's a very famous author. Like I said, I've been reading him since 1984. So with that, we're going to bring in Bill Denko to discuss financial education in the United States. So a question that I have for you, because financial education in the United States, what would you grade the financial literacy in the United States today? Bill, since you're a professor also, as well as an author, a professor in Albany, what would you grade financial education right now in the United States?
Well, probably a low pass, maybe a D.
Yeah.
It's not a failure totally. I mean, there are some good things happening for sure, but it's just not widespread enough. That's I think, one of the real issues.
Right. So what sort of challenges do you see that we have on a going forward basis in terms of financial education?
Well, it doesn't start early enough in the curriculum. My kids have gone through public schools. My grandkids, all 6 of them, well, 5 of them are currently in public schools. One's not old enough. But the point is, the curriculum is full of other stuff that doesn't really allow for this as a part of the curriculum. And that's a shame.
All right. Well, since you give it a low pass, you give it a low pass and I want a better grade. Let's go to the Honorable David M. Walker. Since you were the Comptroller General of the United States, what would you rank financial education in the United States to be? Has it gotten better? What would you give it as a grade?
I would give it a D. It's my understanding that only 14 states out of the 50 require some type of financial education before you graduate from high school. I'm pleased to say that my state, the Commonwealth of Virginia, is one of those 14 states. And at some point in time, a little bit later in the program, I can talk to you about my experience with what they were teaching, what they weren't teaching.
Yes.
But let's just say that it's important that we have it. It's also important that we help people understand that they don't want to follow the bad example of the federal government with regard to financial literacy.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair enough. And so let's talk about financial education in general. What are the benefits of financial education, short-term and long-term, Bill Denko? In other words, like when I was in school, I never had a financial education class. Part of the reason I ever took one, it didn't exist. After I graduated, there's no classes on retirement plans offered in the United States. So what is the benefit? What's the benefit of financial education as opposed to music, art, and Latin, 3 very important subjects that the grandkids are taking right now?
Financial education comes under the broad umbrella of personal responsibility. And personal responsibility goes, not only how you act as an individual in society, but how are you going to act in your own household? And that responsibility entails how are you going to pay your way? One of the problems, and I blame marketers for this, and I was a professor of marketing for 31 years, so I'm going to take some of the blame, is that we have created a society, a wonderful society in so many ways, but a society of hyperconsumption and instant gratification. And once we get back to the basic idea of postponed gratification and long-term savings and taking charge of your financial future, I think we have a pretty dismal situation on our hands.
Okay.
Well, there are plenty of industries that are built around exploiting people's lack of financial literacy. The entire, credit card industry, they want you to get in a certain amount of trouble to have a balance that you haven't paid off for month to month, so you're paying 18 or 20% interest in some cases. And
Or higher.
Hey, Bill, just really quickly, just as a question that crossed my mind, and I may have asked this question before and everything, but there was a notion of something that used to exist. I remember I had one when I was a youngster. I'm not sure that my nephews have one. I need to check with my brother and everything, but there was this notion of an allowance. There was also the notion of like the certain kinds of things that you could have, including some saving bonds and things along those lines from your bank. I remember my grandmother gave me one of those when I was a youngster. So I was just wondering, do those that are in the Gen Z and the Gen X generation, do they even know what an allowance is? You mentioned having grandkids, and I was wondering, do your grandkids get an allowance? And is that something that people still do? Because that was one of the ways that people learned about fiscal responsibility, because you were given the money and you had to, if you wanted to waste it on an ice cream cone, that was on you, but you weren't going to get it again till later on, whenever it was designated was the time to get it. So I was just wondering, is that something that you're even seeing from your own grandkids?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to think that these grandkids are fortunate to have me as a grandfather. Now, what they think, I can't really say. But my children, my adult children and their spouses really have bought into this millionaire next door mentality. They're doing extremely well. I'm happy, and they're sending that message to their grandchildren as well, to their children, my grandchildren. So I know it's happening in my subset, but how many other people are engaged in this kind of behavior? I just couldn't say.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, David, about allowances? What are your thoughts on that? Grandchildren?
I don't hear that word anymore. When I was growing up, as with Mark, that was fairly ubiquitous. I mean, you would find in, mainstream America, the middle class in particular, that, you might get so much a week that your parents would give you for discretionary money, and that's all you got. So when it ran out, you were done. I think it's important to understand that financial education as a means to achieve financial literacy is fundamental. I mean, everybody needs that in order to be able to manage their life throughout life. And let's just give two examples. I mean, I remember going to the college campus when our son, went to the college, and I won't mention the name. It was a great school, but I'm sure it's the same virtually everywhere. Where the day that he was going to sign up for classes, you had a number of credit card companies out front trying to hook people on credit cards. All right. You also have to keep in mind, what is the largest asset on the balance sheet of the federal government? It's called student loans, $1.7 trillion. Okay. And you've got a lot of young people that are going to college, that are signing up for student loans, that are getting degrees that may not even be marketable, that are paying the minimum payment, and are deeply in debt. And so, there are just a number of different examples of where, we really need to do a much better job of financial education, not just for the country, but for the individuals in the country.
Along those same lines and everything, and I'd love to hear Bill Danko's thoughts around this. And I know it's a slight pivot, but it's not a total pivot. There is a very popular thing that exists in the sports world and all along those lines. But I don't know that the folks that are doing this great fiscal windfall are getting a fiscal education and everything. So anybody that follows sports, and if you follow whether it's college sports, particularly college sports, there is a notion called an NIL, name, image, and likeness, and a number of these athletes are making bukus of money off of the NIL and everything along those lines. I know there's some players here in the Carolinas where me and Nick and Kim are that are making a whole lot of money and everything. And definitely even where I went to school at Marquette, there are probably some players that are making that money. I am glad to say and proud to say that I recently learned that my alma mater has a 3.7 GPA average or something like that. So we're not just teaching the athletes to be athletes, but they're actually getting a solid education at Marquette University and not just majoring in like basket weaving or something along those lines. Because when I heard that at one of our games, I was quite proud to learn that we had that. But I just wanted y'all to talk around the NIL because I know a lot of people are getting this money, but it's like winning the lottery. I don't know that they know what they're doing with the money when they get these $1 million contracts. So some of these are in the literally millions of dollars and everything. But I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts about that because that is something that has been very much talked about in the sports world over the last several years.
It's not just with regard to sports; it's also with regard to lottery winners.
Right.
Those people, especially young athletes, and let's go to Bill after this. I mean, young athletes, they're immature. I mean, science says that you don't have a fully functional brain until you're 25 years old. All right. And on top of that, if you've never had any education with regard to money, then there's a tendency to spend, and not preserve it. And when you're an athlete, you're not going to be working for 50 years. There's a limited amount of time that you're going to be able to work. And as I said, it's not just athletes, it's people who win the lottery. It's amazing how many stories you hear about people who come into big money and they don't end up getting the right kind of financial advice and professional help. And before you know, it's gone. But Bill, I'd be interested in Rick, I think is.
Yeah.
Bill.
Yeah, David, you're absolutely right. Even the basic idea, a financial planner I know who deals with athletes who do get these outsized checks on a regular basis. And he reminds, especially those in the football area, what NFL stands for, not for long, right? That they have this short window. And so, but this is the simple formula that he gives his athletes. Think of your this $1 million you're getting in thirds. 1/3, keep it for administration and taxes set aside. 1/3 can be spent immediately, and 1/3 is long-term savings and investment. And if you had that, the proportions may vary a little bit, but if you basically get that idea of that $1 million is only $300,000 to you currently, it's when you believe that you have $1 million to spend is when you really get into trouble. So just that one basic lesson can save a lot of heartache.
Yeah,
For lottery winners too.
So I'd argue that there's room in the high school math curriculum for a lot of this stuff. You get taught a lot of stuff, everybody, like you got geometry, you've got trigonometry, you've got algebra, then you have calculus, and then you have differential equations, but you don't have probability and statistics. You don't have any education in risk. On Twitter, a lot of the dumbest people I see on Twitter are into crypto. And crypto is to some extent a giant Ponzi scheme. And a lot of these people who think they're financial geniuses right now have no idea that, it's a really teetery house of cards.
Yeah. I'm just going to make a little comment about education in general, Bill. There was an article that came out. I'm just going to give my 2 cents on it. This is a newspaper here in the United States called the New York Times. For those internationally who don't know what it is, they wrote a book, How Do I Pay for College? A little article on how to pay for college. It's an insert. It was the worst thing I ever saw in my life because all it was about how you go out and borrow money, go into debt to go to college. Wrong, wrong,
Yeah.
wrong. Now I can tell you my experience. My son went to Georgia Tech free. How did he do it? Georgia has the Hope Scholarship. If you graduate with a B average in a high school in Georgia, you get to go to any Georgia school you want to for free. University of Georgia, Georgia Tech, etc. So he got to go free. Then he went to Duke, the PhD program in electrical engineering for free. How do you do it? Get a good a GRE score, and Duke gave you a full scholarship. Plus, you become a teaching assistant. I've done some research for my grandkids. I can send them to major top 30 educational institutions in the world next to free. Now, they're not in the United States. They're in Switzerland, Italy, Norway, Finland, etc. And this is what I'm looking to do. I'm going like, why would you go into debt? And by the way, there are a lot of colleges in the United States that are value colleges. If they stay here, you go to North Carolina State or UNC, $6,000 a year. You don't go to the school I went to. Do not go to the University of Miami. It's $60,000 a year. You go there for 4 years, you spend $250,000 on a bachelor's degree. It's insane. So when I read through this article on the New York Times, all I could think is trash, trash, trash. All they were doing was talking about how to apply for loans, how to go into debt to get your education when you don't have to in the United States. Why don't they write a good article, how to get college? And I went to Oxford, by the way. You know why? I did the analysis when I was a youngster for my parents because Oxford is a public school. I said it's cheaper for me to go to Oxford than the University of Miami, including round trip airfare and hotel room, your room and board. And they were astonished. Now, by the way, today things change. Oxford has become very popular internationally. It's not cheap. But this is what I'm saying. Why don't they explain the economics of education? And Bill, I know you teach at a state university, which is usually a value oriented, but please, the private schools are not. So I know Rick has a hand up, but then we'll get to you too.
All right. So my kid just got her PhD from King's College, London. All expenses paid, including living expenses. Plus, you get a PhD in Europe, it's 3 years or 4 years. You get a PhD in the US, it's 7 years. So you're racking up debt for twice as long getting your. And so, yeah, there are ways to finance.
Hey, but Rick and I did see Bill's hands, and I
Also,
know we definitely want to get to David.
college system. Like California has a great community college system. You knock out your general ed requirements in a year or two in community college, then you can move into the UC system, the UCLA, Berkeley, all these great schools, but you're only going there for 2 years instead of 4 years, only racking up 2 years worth of debt.
Yeah. And by the way, the article never explained that too. I mean, I clubbed out my first 2 years, so all I had to do 2 years. So I had, and I was a maniac, so I graduated when I was 19 years old. I was in the MBA program. But the thing is, there's ways you can bypass the system, and to do that, you have to take CLEP tests. But what they never tell you is special CLEPs. If you take special CLEPs, you get an extra year. And so this way, I didn't have to go to school for 2 years.
I was actually going to toss it to Dave really quickly.
Dave Walker, yes, we'll bring.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a personal example. One of my nephews, who graduated from a good public high school in Virginia, went to community college, dealt with all the basics at community college, which was a heck of a lot more economical. He could also live at home and commute. And so he didn't get the full college experience the first 2 years. But frankly, he was an average student. He did well in community college. It was a good transition, if you will. And then he got admitted into UVA, University of Virginia, which is one of the best public institutions. He never would have gotten into UVA if he had applied right out of high school. There's no way. So he ended up being able to get a great degree for a lot less cost than otherwise it would have been, because he only had to end up paying the tuition for 2 years rather than for 4 years. And it's hold him well. At some point, I want to come back. Doesn't have to do it now. Let's keep going around. But at some point, I want to come back and talk about that, financial education that my daughter was exposed to. And the good news and the bad news with regard to that.
Just really quickly, because one of the questions I was curious about is, well, two quick questions. One, I hear what you're saying, Nick, and that sounds good and everything if you are of certain economic backgrounds and all along those lines. But for those folks that are listening that might be from living in Compton or living in Harlem or living in the ghettos of Detroit and all along those lines, how can we get them to understand that these opportunities exist and everything? Like I said, I was fortunate enough to go, and I actually got there because of a program called EOP to go to Marquette, the school that I mentioned, and it was for folks that either didn't have the greatest grades, and I had decent grades but not great, or were not didn't have the strongest economics. And at the time, my parents were running a radio station, and I was living in rural North Carolina, so I definitely fell in that category, and I'm glad that I got that tremendous education from that great university and all along those lines. But I'm just wondering, how can we address that? And the other thing that I was curious about, and this is where I was going to ask Dave and even Bill Danko, is we talk about that notion of an allowance. Another institution that I used to remember people would talk about, including the financial aspect of it, and I'm not hearing it as much as I used to, but my grandparents, when they were living, they definitely did a lot of things in their Sunday school, and they did a number of things in the religious community. But even when I go to church, and I'm not saying that I'm the most avid churchgoer at the particular moment and everything, but when I go, I don't hear the financial conversation as much as I used to in even some of our community institutions like the church and like things along those lines. So I just wondering y'all's take on that, because that's something that I'm not hearing even some of our community institutions doing a good job of teaching the way they used to.
Yeah. Oh, Bill.
You haven't gotten the tithing speech yet? Bill, please
Yeah,
go on.
one of the things I know about fundraising in the church is a priest told me, you never tell the congregants you've reached your goal. Just always make it more and more and more. But anyway, getting back to, how do we get the disadvantaged, those in Compton and other places, to say, yes, education is a good thing. I want to, find a good opportunity, perhaps at a community college for starters. In my case, look, I come from a household. My father had a 10th grade education. My mother was a high school graduate. And the best advice I ever got was from my mother, who told me, Bill, stay in school. Mm-hmm. I took her literally. All my degrees right through the PhD, then becoming a professor. So I never left. I know, it's all about parental guidance, isn't it? If you don't have that role model or the advice from somebody you love, like your mother, to tell you stay in school. And you know what? At the graduation, it was 2003, because I was there with my youngest son at RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Ben Carson was the guest speaker, the pediatric neurosurgeon who became Secretary of Housing. Mm-hmm. And his story was so inspiring. He said, every week, his mother would assign a book for him to read and write a one-page essay, and she would take that essay and make some stray marks on it and give it back to him. He never knew that she couldn't read, but she wanted her son, Ben Carson, a pediatric neurosurgeon, well accomplished, and he says because of that parental guidance, he was able to accomplish what he did. We need more of that.
I want to add something too. There is something to be said about the teachers in our education system being good mentors, because I was never encouraged to go to college. My family just didn't have the money. The boys went to school, but not for the girls. And I had really good teachers, and also my boyfriend at the time, who became my husband later, who encouraged me. It was affordable back then because I paid my own way. I worked 2 jobs and worked my way through college. But it was because of the teachers at the school. And maybe we're not paying the teachers enough today to feel like that they need to inspire the kids to go to school. But I also have to say that one of the most disappointing things that I have seen in the past few years is we give students loans that are underage that should never have qualified for these types of loans. They can't even afford to to live when they get out of school without making them take any kind of testing or making them take a class on this is what this loan is. This is what it's going to cost you to get that degree. And this is what you're going to have to pay. And the most important, which I think is the biggest scam of the whole student loan program, a lot of these kids come out, with $200,000 or more debt going to become a doctor. And nobody told them that if you pay the minimum amount, you're only paying interest only. You're not paying any of the principal. And some of them, 5 years in, they're paying due diligently. And then they go look at the bill and they go, oh my God, how did I end up with $250,000 I've been paying for 5 years? Because they're doctors. They don't really look at the bottom line of every contract. But I don't think any student, I think there needs to be a law, David, that no student should be given a loan moving forward without having to take a course on what that loan is and how to pay it off, and take a test and a financial literacy course, and then maybe a grant to go with it. If they do those two things, and then they can get the loan. But I think we have failed the students and the children. I think financial literacy should begin when they're 3 years old. And I just started a program for my nieces and nephews where they each get a little cash case with a ledger, and Aunt Kim gives them money on certain occasions, and they keep up with the cash. It's like one of those cash boxes, but locked. And they are to work with their mom and dads with it. And I've started this at 3 years old because the parents have asked me no more toys, no more. I said, okay, we're not going to do toys, but we're going to do something to encourage these kids to learn how to save money and how to count it. So, but we're not doing that. And the schools should do that. But no loan should ever be given to these kids. And they're kids, they're not adults.
Hey,
They have passed a class, and I'm going to pass it on to Bill and then David.
Good point. I think it was 1998 or thereabouts. Tom Stanley and I have an article in Medical Economics, a trade journal for the medical industry. But the title of the article is, "Doctor, if you're so smart, how come you're not rich?" What an insulting title, but it speaks to that very point about the illiteracy, the financial illiteracy of even the highly educated medical doctors. So, all right, that's all I have to say about that.
I'm only
David.
the second person in my Walker line to graduate from college.
Wow.
My dad was the first.
I was
And
the first.
of course, everybody since then has. But college is not for everybody.
So,
And one of the things that we don't do a very good job of is to help people understand that,
Yeah.
and furthermore to be able to recognize that there are other ways that you can make a decent living, raise a family, and have a decent quality of life, such as the trades, as an example. All right, and many countries do a much better job of that than we do. One particular example is Germany, but I agree with Bill that parents are particularly important. And I know, Kim, you said that, several others did. I remember my dad told me, have a budget, control spending, save, and get out of debt as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I followed that advice, okay? And I passed that advice on. And in fact, when my father passed away, he had done a very good job, and he left some money. And one of the conditions that he and I talked about is, to the extent that anybody was going to get some inheritance, the first thing that they had to do is pay off all their debt. They had to be debt free. So he practiced what he preached. And I'll stop at that. But at some point in time, we got plenty of time left. I want to come back and talk about that financial education course that my daughter had to take.
I want to
Right.
hear about that. Absolutely.
It's interesting.
Yes, Rick.
It's fun.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kim, that if you get married with with clergy, the couple has to sit down with the priest or rabbi for a couple hours and get counseled about this huge step you're taking. There's no counseling when you take on student debt. The financial crash of 2008 was built on saddling homeowners with insane mortgages and just building up these mortgage products, just giving everybody a home, even if they couldn't qualify for them. And it wrecked the US economy for a decade. And in student loans, you should have to sit down, you and your parents should have to sit down for several hours of discussing the implications of the loan and seeing that there are alternatives to taking on this huge debt.
Speaking
Well,
of no
Rick, I want
counseling,
to add something to that because we're at this point thinking that a lot of parents understand loans, and there are a lot of people in the poverty gap that would not even know how to explain that to their children. And, David, you were very lucky to have a father who did that. My father and my parents struggled a lot. I always heard, don't get yourself in debt. And I worked hard. I worked 2 jobs through high school and through college to never get in debt. And when I got older, I did, because I learned you can't get a loan unless you have debt, right? So there's a lot to learn. And I'm going to be starting a show real soon with someone who feels the same way about the way I do about the lending industry and how to get a loan, how to fix your credit. And I always try to understand, why do they punish you for paying off your debt? Because the credit bureaus do. So, but I agree that we do need to educate them. But, a lot of the parents don't know all of that, Rick. You're very blessed to know these things. And, Sasha and all of us are blessed to know them where we are today. And I think moving forward, we can inspire these kind of things that need to be done. Real quick, I want to just do a quick ad. We do have a bookstore now. All of our published authors are in the bookstore. Please check it out. And Bill Danko's book as well. So just hold on for a break. And we're back with Economics with David Walker, our special guest, Bill Danko, who authored Who Wants to Be
richer than a millionaire.
Next Door. But so anyway, I think, Mark.
Yeah, speaking of that knowledge and everything, I was just wondering, and this can be a morbid topic to some degree and everything, but I'm thinking that those people that are inheriting items and everything, because we do know that as you get older parents, and definitely none of us here will live to be 200, even though I keep joking that I'm going for that and all along those lines, but none of us will make it to that state. So we will all leave this earth. And I'm wondering, how much of this education are we not passing down to our youngsters? Because I know a lot of people, we talked about the people that are fortunate enough to win the lottery, but there are also a lot of people that get their wealth and they inherited something, and I don't know that they are getting an education on that as well. So whether you're picking up some land, like I know some people that have picked up land in my own family, or you're picking up some bank accounts or some other properties, how much of that education do we also need to do as well? And I'd love to hear from Bill and David, because like I said, none of us going to be here forever, and hopefully we'll get some things either passed down to us or that we will wind up passing down to others as well. And I don't know that we're educating the next generation down in that space, because we oftentimes hear about generational wealth.
Yeah.
Bill, go ahead, buddy.
There's certainly some, ancient wisdom that's available to all of us. I mean, just thinking about the conversation we're having about this debt burden in the book of Proverbs, written 2,500 years ago, because I've used this in one of my presentations. It's chapter 22, verse 7, the one line, the borrower is a slave to the lender. And if you understand the burden that you're taking on being in debtor's prison, really, as Kim pointed out, these loans, you're just paying the interest, and it seems to go on forever. Well, that's a form of slavery, that's for sure. You're a
It
slave
is.
to the land.
Yeah.
So I
You
agree.
are
So it's
so
ancient, ancient wisdom. We don't have to reinvent a lot of stuff if we just get back to some of the basic principles that societies have been built on over the years. But we've
Well,
strayed.
And we also have to remember, as Einstein said, who was a fairly bright guy,
Mhm.
the most powerful force on earth is not nuclear energy. The most powerful force on earth is the power of compounding.
Mhm.
And if you're a saver and an investor, it works for you. If you're a debtor, it works against you. Now may be a good time to transition to that course that I was telling you about.
Yes.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Thank
It
you,
was-
David.
I started off very optimistic about this. We were going on a trip, from Washington down to Florida to visit my parents, my daughter's grandparents. And she had been given an assignment as part of her course that she had to come up with a budget, which is good, assuming that she had a certain career, whatever career she wanted, when she first got out of school or whatever, trade school, college, whatever. And then she had to put together a budget to see, how she was going to be able to live. Well, she started interviewing about, well, gee, how much does so-and-so make? And what does this cost? And what does that cost? Whatever. So she does her budget. But then at the end, when she did it, there were 3 big problems. The first problem was that they were doing their budget based upon gross income, not net income.
Mm.
And therefore, they didn't include something called taxes.
Mhm.
Always
So,
get it.
FICA, and both for Social Security and Medicare, state income tax, federal income tax, et cetera. So when she got done doing the first pass, she thought she had extra money. I said, that's great. You got more savings. But then when she had to put in something for taxes, she was underwater.
Mm.
But then the second thing was, I said, keep in mind, I said, you have more for savings. Well, one of the line items that she was supposed to budget for was not there, called savings. There was no line item for savings. And the other thing that there was not a line item for, there was no line item for charitable contributions.
Mhm.
So as a result, they're teaching her to budget based on gross rather than net. They're not teaching the importance of savings. They're not teaching, that we all have a responsibility to give something back, if you will, which was, I thought, pretty fundamentally flawed. But at least they had a course.
Mhm.
And
Speaking of
I
courses.
want to add to that, David. Nick and I went to the Federal Reserve Financial Literacy course, a financial literacy program in Chicago a couple of years ago, and they had this Money Savvy Pig for children that taught the kids about earning money, saving money, spending money, budgeting it, and planning and donating. And what I noticed, and I brought this up to them, I said, where's the taxes? Why haven't you been teaching the kids that they have to pay taxes? They were teaching about charitable contributions, which I thought was, very big on their part. But that everyone forgets to teach about taxes, the net, not the gross.
And there's only one way they're going based on our finances. They're going up, not down.
Right, exactly. And we need to teach, and that's a big impact on a person's paycheck. No one taught me either. When I first got my first paycheck in high school, I was so excited. I ripped open the envelope and I'm like, what happened to my money?
Who's this FICA guy?
Right.
My money.
What?
FICA
You didn't
guy.
work. I worked. I sweat. But yeah, and nobody even told me that I had to, file taxes the next year. And I was so shocked. Like, I was so scared. Nobody taught me any of this, not at home, not at school. I had a teacher who knew I had to do a lot of things on my own. And she did sit me down and she showed me how to file taxes and stuff. So I was very thankful for her. But We don't teach that in school either, I don't think, do we?
No,
No.
they don't. They don't teach it in college either. I mean, when it comes to FICA and your Medicare tax, and it's kind of also disingenuous because when you are an employee, you see 6.2% taken out on Social Security. You see 1.45 taken out on Medicare. But when you're a business owner, you have to match that. So when you're a business owner, you take out 6.2% and then you match it. So it's really 12.4. You take out 1.45, you match it another 1.45. So here's the reality. They never teach you that until you own a business. 15.3% of everything you make is taken out on Social Security and Medicare taxes. Do you know, Bill, David, I didn't learn that until I went to business for myself, and I got an LLM in tax and they don't teach you that.
Well, there is a cap on
It's
Social Security,
basic
but there's not a cap on
fundamental
Medicare.
flaw
Right.
of our system is our education system when it comes to taxation. So I don't know, and it could have been learned in middle school. It's not rocket science, but I believe that a lot of the teachers don't even know it, and that's the reason they don't teach it, which is really astonishing. So if you're working for a living right now and you're a wage earner, your 15.3% is taken out whether you like it or not. However, if you did this very simple trick, not trick, but plan, you create a corporation and the money flows to the corporation and then to yourself as dividends and interest, you don't pay any Social Security and Medicare taxes by having an S corp. So the trick is for the business owners listening out there. All the business owners know this, the employees don't. But if you're going into a business, think about an S corp taking dividends and interest and eliminating the Social Security and Medicare tax, saving yourself 15.3%. This is basic tax planning 101, but I can tell you this, unless you go to see your CPA, it's not taught in any schools that I know of. That's
Hey,
fine.
Nick, along those same lines, and this is for Bill Danko and for David Walker and everything, do you think that we are teaching enough? Because you kind of alluded to it, David, when you're talking about community colleges, about entrepreneurship. Because I know a lot of people that are in the school system now, whether they're in high school or grade school or whether they're in college, that are literally going to go to work for somebody else. And I don't know that they're necessarily thinking about going into business. And like you said earlier about college, I'm not saying that being in business is for everybody and everything, but I'm just wondering y'all's thoughts about entrepreneurship and if that is being taught enough, or are we teaching more people to go to work for somebody else, go work for the man, for lack of a better term?
Good question. Yeah. Bill, what do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, right. We basically train students to work for the man. And you know what? When students come to my office, or did come to my office, I'm emeritus now, and they told me they want to be an entrepreneur. I said, gee, that's really great. What's your product or service you want to create?
Mhm.
And, they fumble around with that. But I ask them, the drop dead question is, tell me how the world got along before you came up with this idea.
Mhm.
And if they can't talk about the unique selling proposition of saying, this is why it's going to be a success, this is what makes it unique, that, I don't mean to discourage them. I'm just saying if they can't answer that question, they'll end up working for the man.
I also have another plug
But
on
that's
that.
not a bad thing. That's like
It's
getting
not a
a
bad
free
thing. No,
education.
it's
Getting
not bad.
paid to get
Yeah, they're getting
educated.
paid
I did
education.
that for years before I started my own company.
But see,
I
I
work
have
for other-
another bent on that. And I'm just going to tell you what it is. See, I was forced basically in 1984 to open up my own law practice right out of law school. And I was very lucky because our plan was good, very successful first year. First week, I made $3,650 in the week. And I was going like, wow, this is great. Much better than working back then at $8.50 an hour. But here's what they don't tell you. And all entrepreneurs know this. All successful business owners know it. Everybody else doesn't know it. Be prepared to work 80 hours a week, not 40, 80. 40 hours is what you're going to do your job. The other 40 hours, you're going to be looking for a job. Seriously.
Yep.
And every successful business owner I know of works about 80 hours a week. They do not work 40 hours. So if you want a 40-hour work week, go work for the man. If you want to be the man, work 80 hours.
No, not only that, but
What
not
is
only
this?
not only
Joshua says
that,
this. Mark, full stop. full stop.
No, but
40
full
years.
stop along those same lines. But hold on a second, I got to put a counter to that. I got to put a counter to that because most people that I know that are in the business world, and I think Jacoby can speak to this as well, and even Sasha, they do not necessarily just do one job. Because many entrepreneurs I know, including myself, I wind up having to work multiple jobs. I know some musicians that are also driving Uber and other things. I can tell you that just in this last weekend, I've already probably put in about 45 hours in the various works that I do because of having to maintain the lifestyle that I want to live and to try to make everything fit in that space of entrepreneurship. So a lot of entrepreneurs I know are not working 80 hours a day. They may be working closer to 90 to 100.
You're
You
right.
could build an entrepreneurial curriculum out of watching episodes of Shark Tank. Shark Tank has all these lessons about, what it takes and how even a good idea could be just a terrible idea for reasons you hadn't thought about. Like often it's shelf space. You've got a great new food idea. Yeah, how are you going to get supermarkets to put it on the shelves?
Right.
Right.
And
What-
so a lot of these financial lessons, not just seems like could fit on your phone. That I would guess that there are apps now that help you monitor your finances, but they're probably not that sophisticated
No,
or
they're
widely
tons of them.
used.
There are tons of them. I use one myself. There's one called Mint. And there's one called, I think it's Acorn or something like that. But there are several of them. Now, the only problem with those apps, and I'm thinking Bill can address this, as can definitely David Walker, is that it's kind of like that notion of putting in the correct information. If you're not putting in the correct information, then it's not giving you the assessment that you want, and all along those lines. Because you can put in the information all day long, but if it's not the correct information, then it's not giving you the correct picture. At least that's my observation. But Bill, what's your thoughts around that? Because I know that there are a number of these apps, but if you don't put in the money that you're making, if you're getting it misread, then you're not really getting the true picture.
Mark, you're absolutely right. GIGO, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
As simple as that. So,
Your phone spies on you all the time. Your phone should be able to figure out some stuff. Like your phone should tell you, oh, you just went to Starbucks and spent $6.90 on a drink, and your net income is only $11 an hour. Did you really want to spend,
No.
And you charged it. And you charged it.
I'm going to plug this book again. See, one thing good about when I read this, okay, they were talking about millionaires who clip coupons, even though they don't have to, they do, okay, because they always look for a deal and save money. And I drive my wife nuts because Harris Teeter keeps sending us these coupons. Always clip the coupons because it's $10 for $75 spent. And I just go, you can't get that rate of return anywhere else. You just clip it.
Hey, Nick, I know some people that are in the wealthy space that are big fans of antique stores, big fans of thrift stores, and big fans of the dollar store. And I'm sure that Bill Danko and David Walker probably know some people that are in that same camp that make some pretty decent money, but they will go to a thrift store in a minute and get them something that is very affordable and all on those lines. And even to what you just said earlier and everything, I do wish that app would exist and everything, because one of the jokes that I used to tell sometimes when using that ATM card was that I knew that the ATM card was laughing at me because I knew that I didn't have the money and I'm trying to put the card in there and the ATM card is going like, Mark, you do not have the $100 you want in that bank right now. So I don't even know why you asking me for it, because you don't have it.
One of the things I remember when I was growing up and when gas prices were at a different level than they are right now, that my dad, when he saw a gas station who had a gas price that was like just a few cents less than one down the street, he would pull over even if he only needed a couple of gallons of gas. I mean, that's just kind of burnt into me.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, I mean,
because that's what the millionaire next door would do.
yeah, I mean,
Keep
that's the
it
reason people
full.
should read that book.
yeah, keep
Keep
it
it
full,
full.
keep
It's
it
the
full.
book.
Yeah.
But I want to add something too. You know, we were talking about charitable contributions, and we could also do some charitable contributions into the financial literacy programs for people. I will be going to the Super Bowl this week. I wasn't planning on it. It was a last minute, Kim, you need to get here. And they're paying my way, covering my expenses, and got me already into the events. But it's about the pregame events. They're all charitable events. So maybe next year we can kind of plan ahead of time and get a charitable program for financial literacy, because this is probably the biggest place to get as much exposure in 1 week as you can on these programs. But you know, we need to think about how we're teaching our children so that they can survive the future. And I know that all of you do this. I know David even does this. He goes to DC to help us. But we need to focus more too on not just our own children, but how we can reach out to other people and make it available. Because like David mentioned, not all the states are on board in teaching the children financial literacy. And that's very disappointing.
California might be getting on board. There's a proposition that might end up on the ballot to make financial literacy mandatory in high school.
Hey, just really quickly, and you kind of alluded to it, Kim, and everything, and I know we're winding down, but this is actually for both Bill Danko and David, our esteemed guests and everything. What can we do about teaching? Because speaking of shows, I had a friend that actually did a show right here in North Carolina. It was a telenovela that dealt with predatory lending. They actually talked about predatory lending as a soap opera standpoint, but they addressed it, and my good friend Dilcy Davis and her crew actually put together that Nostro Barrio and all along those lines. But I was just wondering, that's an issue that exists in the minority community that I don't think gets addressed enough, is this notion of some of those financial people going after us and going after this notion of attacking folks that can't necessarily afford it in some of these fiscal spaces. But your thoughts around that, Bill, because predatory lending is a major issue.
Well, it's illegal, isn't it?
It is illegal, but there's still people that are doing it.
Right, but the district attorney or the attorney general should be on top of this. And I really don't know how it's enforced. Maybe David, you can add to that.
No, but let me change gears a little bit. I mean, I just went to a movie this weekend called The Beekeeper, and I recommend it. And it's basically about how you have fraudsters that are trying to take advantage of seniors and to bilk them of their money. And you know that is an increasing problem.
What
I mean,
book
that's,
is that?
that's not one where they're the beekeeper. That's not one where they're trying to lend them money with predatory rates. They're just trying to steal their money.
Right.
Right. There's a lot of them out there. I'm doing a show with someone about that issue. So I'm going to get that book. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a movie too. You got to see the movie. It's an action. It's an action film. You got to see the movie.
So you're talking about the need for continuing financial education.
Exactly.
If you get AARP magazine for seniors, about half of every issue is how not to get your money stolen.
Right.
Boomers have 94%. People over 45 years old have 94% of the privately held wealth in this country. And we're targeted all the time.
Yep.
Yeah, AARP, that is something they do a pretty good job of. There's
Yeah,
no
they do a good
I
job
would
of that.
imagine. I would imagine that AMAC does too, which is the conservative version of
Yeah,
AARP.
and you know the problem I have, I'm just to address this to Bill and David Walker. Okay, I go out and I clip my coupons. I get my $10 off on $75 spent, which I think is a great deal. So while I'm trying to save money, Congress just announced they're going to spend another $112 billion, billion dollars that they don't have and give it all away. So that's the real problem that I have.
And the question is that nobody's asked, and I will. How are you going to pay for it?
Exactly.
How are you going to pay for it?
There is no plan to pay for it. They're just
No,
going to
that's what I'm
borrow the
saying.
money.
You know, just right there. You know, I mean, it's a fundamental question. How are you going to pay for it?
There's no thoughts on how they're going to get the money in. They just know how to send it out. And it really bothers the millionaire next door that they do this all the time. In other words,
it comes under Isn't it called the modern monetary theory? Yeah,
which is flawed and failed.
right.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, they're addicted to spending, to deficits, and debt.
Well, and
Right.
you know what? And in the words of the movie Jerry Maguire, we should be saying, "Show me the money," right? That's
Yeah,
what we're
and-
talking
and they
about
don't.
here.
And with that, we want to thank our viewers in the United States and around the world. For those who have Roku television sets or smart TVs, because most people actually watch us on mobile phones, like 55,000 a month. Okay, please go to Roku, go to your television set, go to Roku, type in Pod TV, and you'll see our 4 channels that we have on Pod TV, including this show and other shows on the network. I got to tell people to do it because otherwise they won't do it. They continually watch on their mobile phones and desktops. But you can actually see us on your TV, your smart TV, by typing in Pod TV on your Roku set. And with that, we want to thank our viewers in the United States and around the world for Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker, special edition on financial education. See you then. Bye-bye.
I thought that worked fine.